Good evening. All right. I'm Trevor Morrison. I'm the Dean of the Law School, and I am thrilled to be here this evening, really just to say good evening and to welcome all of you to this conversation put on by our Center on Race, Inequality, and the Law, a conversation on race, inequality, and the legal profession, a public conversation on private practice. This is the second academic year of the center's existence. It will be officially 1 year old next semester, I guess. And we're just thrilled by the work the center's already doing under the leadership of Tony Thompson as its faculty director and Vincent Sutherland as its executive director. I just want to say publicly once again how grateful I am to each of you for your leadership of this center and how excited I am for the work that the center's doing and I know will continue to do going forward. This is, I was just saying to the panelists, this is one of those evenings when I kind of wish I could stop being dean long enough to attend one of the panels that I come to welcome people to at the beginning, as opposed to having just to run to another panel to say welcome again. But since I can't do that, I will look forward to hearing all about this conversation, which I'm sure will be extremely interesting. Tony is going to be playing moderator this evening and will introduce each of our panelists, but before I turn it over to him, let me just say thank you to all of you for being here this evening and look forward on behalf of the audience to what I'm sure will be a terrific conversation. So without more, Tony Thompson.
Good evening. I want to say that I appreciate you being here this evening. What's happened recently is that the issues of race and inequality have always been salient, but they've become much more salient today. We've watched as the national conversation has deteriorated into toxic tweets and finger pointing, and the public debate on issues of racial and social justice reveal rising levels of misunderstanding, distrust, and division. The challenge facing this generation, and I see some of my students in the room, is that you've got to draw a line in the sand around inclusion, racial and social and gender equity, and social justice. You need to do that both as individuals, but particularly as lawyers. I think that it's very important to understand that the legal profession has always suffered from an inability to appreciate and value difference. Whether we're talking about the public sector or the private sector, our profession has not benefited from the rich racial and ethnic diversity of our communities and our country. So to be perfectly frank, we've seen some moderate progress in the last decade. And that's in part because we had someone in the White House who was good on issues of racial and social justice. The administration took principled positions in the criminal justice system to reduce racial disparities, in voting to prevent states from erecting barriers to dilute the voting power of people of color, and employment to bolster fairness. But today, the current administration is running to the past. It isn't looking to tear down the things that divide us. It's looking to build walls and to incite hatred. It's placed an imprimatur on division, distrust, and fear. Let me give you just a few examples. First, in the face of a raw display of racism and religious bigotry and ethnic hatred in Charlottesville, we watched the president irresponsibly draw a false equivalency between those who embodied hatred and those who protested against it. His words, his policies, and his cabinet picks have emboldened those groups. And white supremacists have continued to march on the grounded belief that they have the approval of the White House. Second, the president pardoned a law enforcement official who brazenly directed his deputies to racially profile and intimidate people of color. Former Sheriff Joe Arpaio, a 21st century Bull Connor, a pardon that sent a message to those who engage in racist law enforcement practices that he endorses that behavior. And perhaps the most telling and heartless act we have seen is the retrenchment on DACA. His attacks on young people attempting to fulfill the American dream represented yet another low point. He's now using the dreamers as a chit in bargaining for Congress for funds to build a wall between us and Mexico. To abandon them and force them to live in the fear that they might be deported from a country that they only know as their home is unthinkable. So I have said before, and I will say again, when leadership in Washington fails, as it has on social and racial justice, we need to fill that void. We need to look to state and local government to step up. We need to look to individual citizens to say no to the government's excesses. And we need to look to the private sector to help restore the sanity of the national leadership landscape. So tonight, we have four superstars. They're from the private sector, but they have spent much of their professional life serving in the public interest. and we'll have an opportunity to engage all four of them in a conversation about the profession, the nation, and leadership. Damaris Hernández is a graduate of this law school. She is the first Latina partner at Cravath, Swaine, and Moore. In the 20-plus years I've been on this faculty, she is one of the superstars that we've graduated, and she's quite dear to me. I've seen her grow from a smart, strong young lawyer to a formidable partner in this city. Lisa Davis is another of our graduates, I'm proud to say. She's a former law review editor, a Root Tilden scholar. She clerked for the Honorable Constance Baker Motley. Lisa is a lawyer who has been at the epicenter of culture, politics, race, and gender. She's been identified as one of the best entertainment lawyers in America. She's represented a diverse set of clients, ranging from, on one hand, the Pulitzer Prize-winning Dr. Manning Marable, on the other, Public Enemy. We're excited to have her with us tonight. And Debo Adegbile. Did I do okay?
We're close.
Thank you. Yet another NYU grad and the former NAACP Legal Defense Fund lawyer, a former senior counsel to the Senate Judiciary Committee, a seasoned Supreme Court litigator, and a champion of the rights of the disenfranchised. He's a national leader. When I was asked to take this job as the founding director of the center, I went to speak to Debo. I wanted to ask him about what the challenges he thought we would face. I knew that he would help guide us, and he's somebody I'm proud to call my friend. And finally, Theodore Wells. While I'm tempted to say that Ted Wells needs no introduction, it would be a loss for many in this room tonight. Long before I came to NYU over 20 years ago, I've heard of Ted Wells when I was a trial lawyer in Northern California. He is the dean, the heart, and the soul of the bar. I don't engage in hyperbole when I say that Ted Wells is a lawyer's lawyer. He has represented, or at least been asked to represent, every high-profile client in the country, from elected and appointed officials to organizations and law firms. He's also been in a leadership position in some of the most important organizations in our country, among them the Board of Directors of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the United Negro College Fund, the Democratic Party, the Harvard University Corporation. I could go on. But I learned something new recently about Ted. Last week, we were at a program at the Harvard Law School honoring Professor Charles Ogletree for his service. And I listened as Ted traced the contributions of black lawyers in this country, noting the efforts of Charles Hamilton Houston, Derrick Bell, Charles Ogletree. It was a history lesson. He talked about how these amazing lawyers had been a bridge from the civil rights movement to today. One thing that all of you in this room should know is that Ted Wells is one of those bridges. So join me in welcoming my panel. So tonight, as you know from my qualifications of these panels, they could all give a speech on the topic that we're talking about tonight. But instead, we're going to use a different methodology. We're going to engage in a conversation, and they're going to get a chance to talk with each other and with me about some of the issues of the day. I haven't talked to them about the questions that I'm going to ask. It's why they might look a little nervous right now as they're sitting next to me. But the idea is that they're going to have an opportunity to talk, and you're going to have an opportunity to eavesdrop on this conversation. I've asked them to be provocative, to take positions that may not be their own, but they know exist in the field. And so before we begin, let me also say to my panelists that you shouldn't wait to be called on. You should just jump in, even if somebody's already talking. You should, no need to act any different than when just because we're on stage. Let me say that tonight I want to start with a conversation that seems to me to be the intersection of race and ethnicity continues to permeate conversations about the future of America. Ted, I want to start with you. Do you see concerns around race as static and something that will always be with us? Or do you think that there are concerns that society will eventually overcome?
I would like to say that at some point, society will overcome issues of race. But I believe that day is beyond the lifetime of anybody in this room and any children you may have. And perhaps any children your children may have. When I was in law school, my mentor was Professor Derrick Bell. And I was at Harvard, and later on he came here to NYU, so Derrick Bell connects both schools, and especially the African-American law students. But Derek, who remained my mentor right up until the time he passed, had the view that racism was so deep in this country that there was a possibility we would never be able to defeat it. Now, I've not adopted that almost pessimistic view of Derek, only because if I did, I don't think I could get up in the morning, and I couldn't get through the day. Derek was able to get through the day because he believed that even though we perhaps could not eradicate racism, we had an obligation to confront it. And there was this like joyous experience in doing battle that was a righteous battle, even though you might not win it. I don't think I need to answer that, metaphysical question, can we overcome it in 200 years? But Derek's basic view, and I'm going to give you an optimistic twist, was that we had to put racism in historical context. And for me, what that means is, I was born in 1950. At the time I was born, segregation was legal in a huge part of the United States. I was born in Washington, D.C. D.C. school systems were legally segregated. The Brown decision was made in 1954, and I started kindergarten in September of 55 after the D.C. school system was desegregated. A lot of people don't realize Washington, D.C. was one of the 5 school systems involved in Brown. So from my perspective, Brown kind of begins everything. It's the first time the Supreme Court has taken a position that we're going to try to have an integrated society, even though they qualified with all deliberate speed. But I kind of see the game beginning with the Brown decision. And Derek's view was similar to that, and he really said, and used to say to me all the time, Ted, we're not going to do this in your lifetime. And so if you have that perspective that America just started to try to grapple in a positive way with this issue of race, with the Brown decision in 54, then you don't become so pessimistic. You say, you know what? If you take slavery back to the early 1600s and you say, look, we had 200 years of slavery and 50 years of Jim Crow, and we're all starting kind of fresh now, whites and blacks, to try to grapple with this new model post-Brown, then we're kind of early in the game. And if you look at it from that perspective, you can say, well, in my lifetime, my professional lifetime, I've seen an African-American president, I've seen 2 African-American attorney generals. I'm sitting up here as the head of litigation at Paul Weiss. I got my law school classmate, Ken Chenault, is the head of American Express. I got Ken Frazier, my law school classmate at Merck. I've got my young Paul Weiss associate who graduated from NYU, Hakeem Jeffries, as the congressman from Brooklyn and positioned to do much bigger things. So look, you can take an optimistic spin if you want to take a historical perspective. I mean, my real message to the young people is, I know y'all talk about get woke and all that, but I mean, but straight up, I want you to understand, the most important thing I can tell you tonight is that this is a continuing battle, a continuing struggle, and my biggest concern is that the generation coming up, that you learn your history and you understand this is a continuum. And it was somewhat easy for my generation to be in constant fighting mode because we truly came up in the midst of the civil rights era, the Black Power movement. I mean, when I look at John Lewis, I think SNCC, Stokely Carmichael, Rap Brown. We have a whole perspective. Our whole lives have been devoted to this battle, and I just want to make sure that this next generation that's coming up understands that we're passing the baton to you, and that the battle is going to go on for at least another 100 years. So, I'm like, saddle up.
So Lisa, how do you address this whole issue of the arc of the discussion of race in the country, and how do you see it going?
Well, I guess I would say, I have a similar perspective. Of course, I'm younger than Ted. but I have a similar perspective of, of the arc of history. And what I see, what's a little different, and that could be scary for younger folks now, is that there's a retrenchment. There are things going on, there are things being said by people in positions of power that I have not seen in my life. And that's scary, but, the only way out is through. We can't hide from it. Our grandparents went through much worse. And the thing, Ted just rattled off all of his classmates and where they are. One of those attorneys general was my college classmate and tennis partner, Loretta Lynch. So, we have a lot more resources than folks, folks did a lot with a lot less. So whether you're in law firms, whether you're in, end up in companies, whether you end up at legal aid, the Legal Defense Fund, there's more of us and we have more resources. So we have an obligation. One of the things that I take seriously, we take an oath to uphold the Constitution and the laws of the state. That's number one. Number two, none of us would be here but for Thurgood Marshall, Constance Baker Motley, Robert Carter, Jack Greenberg. Therefore, we owe it to them because, I know that Judge Motley's secretary used to go down south with a gun in her purse. Judge Motley didn't have one, but her secretary did. She's like, look, they know who you are. I'm just some little black woman with a typewriter in her bag. I'm going to have a gun. So, real talk. I'm just saying it could be worse. So, as scary as all of this stuff is, we also have to realize that we have a lot more resources and we're going to have to draw upon them.
So let me change directions for a minute, and let me start on the other with Debo. Let me ask you a question. Is there a role for law firms to change the national conversation around race? Because it's not happening with the leadership out of Washington at this point.
So I think that's an interesting question because obviously law firms have their own challenges in this space, and so to lead, you have to look inside and think about what you're doing. But we do have special talents as lawyers. We have special abilities. And one of the things that's been interesting is to think, in some ways, how there have been responses to some of the national policy efforts, many of which have come from lawyers in big firms. Some have come from clients, frankly, early on some of the stuff related to the travel ban and the like. Some corporations stepped up where you find yourself in this weird situation wondering if there is going to be a statement of inclusion that's stronger from corporate America recognizing some of the exigencies of its global businesses than there is going to be from electeds who are supposed to be taking an oath upholding the Constitution and the flag. And so I think that law firms can play a role, but lawyers, and we used to be very mindful of this at LDF, we were the lawyers to the movement, the Legal Defense Fund, and there were others that led. And so I think law firms can play a role, but to me, I don't see law firms as being at the tip of the spear, as it were. I don't think that they're going to be the leaders. Lawyers are generally conservative, and law firms are businesses, which tend to be conservative also and comprised of many different individuals. And so I think that there are things that can be done for sure, but I think it might overstate the case if we were to suggest that the leading edge of change is going to come from law firms. When I was a 1L here, there was a great talk that Derek gave in the room just across the hall. And he was talking a little bit about his career and his time, and many of you know the career of Derek Bell, and you know that he quite publicly gave up some of his important positions as the first tenured African-American professor at Harvard over a principled stance that the university at that time had not tenured an African-American woman. And he then went on to Oregon and then protested there when he encountered similar resistance, and ultimately wound up here and ended his illustrious career here. But one of the things he said to us in the other room is that people call me a radical. He said, I'm not a radical, I'm a law professor. If I were a radical, I'd be in a tree with a gun. He'd say, I'm just teaching the law. And so while I'm not suggesting folks climb trees and arm themselves in response, I am suggesting that sometimes to have an understanding of where you are in the structure of society, and to Lisa's point, to think what you can do from the platform you're in, the seat you're in, is very important. But I wouldn't want to overstate the case and say that the grand marshal of the parade is going to be big law. My expectation is that's not going to happen, which doesn't in any way undermine some of the important and significant victories that big law can contribute to, or law in general can contribute to.
Let me turn and talk a little bit more about law firms. We said at the outset that law firms have been slow to appreciate diversity. Damaris, how do you deal with the pressure of being one of the few or the first in your law firm? And what are the challenges that status presents for you?
Depending on the day, it's a pressure or a privilege, right? I think as the first Latina partner at Cravath, I need to make sure I'm not the last. So really, I'm quiet? I've never been accused of that. Yeah, so as being the first Latina partner at Cravath, I guess my first priority is to make sure I'm not the last, right? And I think the way I focus on that is not only using my platform to make sure that I'm a role model, so I get people to see that it is a possibility to be in a position of power at a big law as a person of color, but I also make sure that big law, like my firm, it creates a safe space for people to feel that they can come in, they can be supported, they can have opportunities, they can find mentors, and they can get promoted. And this is me, I know, Debo, I know. This is me being not delusional, but hopeful, right? And it's my role as one of the only people of color in leadership role at my firm to make sure it happens, right? So the pressure is making sure that I speak to young kids like you guys and say, look, you too can do it. I'm not special, right? I just was resilient. I knew what I wanted. I, sought the opportunities. I sought mentors. I believed in myself. Others made me believe in myself. And then I also go and make sure that I talk to the other people of power in my firm and make sure that they understand what the benefits of diversity are, what the problems are with the perceptions of the people of color who are not coming to our firm, right? We do recruiting all the time, and we get superstars coming into the door, and we give them offers, and they choose not to come. And so we need to examine why it is that people self-select out, right? Do they not think they're supported or wanted in our spaces? Or do they not think that they, belong there because there's no one like them on the letterhead? Or are they like me, who even 2 years in, sometimes walk into that marble building thinking, today's the day they're gonna find out I'm a fraud, right? That self-imposter syndrome, it doesn't leave just because you got a title, right? When you're first generation and when you don't see people like you in those halls, you're like, I fell through the cracks. Nope. I actually walked in that door and showed them that I gave value. And that's what everybody has to do. And we have to support our young people and let them know that they have value add, and that they belong in these spaces.
So how do you, the rest of you, deal with the challenges of being one of the few partners of color in a firm?
I have a big mouth. And it's a relatively small firm. We're 80 lawyers. I was fortunate. I think, Damaris kind of touched on it in terms of having mentors. I had people at the firm that were supportive at the outset. But the other thing, and I think this is key for people of color, is you cannot go into a firm, just put your head down and work and not develop relationships. And that is a mistake I see people, particularly in big law, make. They think, I'm gonna outwork everybody. You're not gonna be able to. And not to say that you're not gonna work hard and that you're not gonna do excellent work. But the other thing that I did is I developed relationships outside of the firm. I was, in the community, I was involved in politics. And so for example, one of my partners when I was an associate went to a meeting and ran into Gordon Davis. And he goes, Gordon Davis speaks very highly of you. How do you know Gordon Davis? And I'm like, let me worry about how I know Gordon Davis. All I know is that you went somewhere, you were in a negotiation, and a partner in another firm knew about me. And those kinds of things give you insurance, because if you're just an anonymous person of color, that has no relationships, in some environments, they will feel that they can mess with you. So that's, and I think it's important to pick your firm. So I was teasing Damaris because I was a summer associate at Cravath, and my joke about my time as a summer associate is that they were so sexist they never noticed I was black. Because literally, the first day I went in, I decided I was going to do a rotation in corporate, and they literally said to me, "A woman in corporate, a trailblazer." I was like, "Okay, am I in the DeLorean and have we gone back several decades? What the heck?" So I purposefully, when I finished my clerkship, chose a firm that, I went to Kramer Levin initially, which was a firm that was known as a litigation firm. They had a lot of former law clerks. They were known as being a little bit more nimble and liberal, and I was still the only black lawyer in the place, But, you pick the environment. Some environments are going to be more hospitable than others.
Can I just comment on two?
Sorry.
No.
Not to
Oh, I'm
drag
not gonna address the Cravath comment. We've come a long way. Look, I'm here.
Exactly.
But two things. I echo that you can't go in there and just work hard, but the first 2 years at any firm are critical. You need to be excellent. Your work product must be stellar. You need to build that brand, right? You need to show that you're competent, you're, trustworthy, reliable, that you're a badass, right? And you build your credibility and you could ride that, okay? So you go in there and you be excellent. But then you need to build relationships like she said. And look, most of our places don't have the diversity. So don't go looking for that one brown partner to be your mentor. You need to find mentors and sponsors and people that don't look like you. And you'll be surprised that I call it having your board of directors, right? You have one who will help you navigate like the politics for the organization. You'll have one who will show you how to have a successful career. And then you have another director who will show you how, or at least with me, how to manage having 2 kids while you're still an associate and then still become a partner at a firm. So you need to find those relationships, but you need to not worry about making sure that you're finding relationships with people who share your experiences, your background, and commonalities. You actually want people who have been through it, who know how to do it, and who are respected enough that if they say, "Hey, she's good," people are going to believe you're good, even if they've never even worked with you. So.
Let me follow up on that. Debo, actually, all 4 of you. So in my preparation, there's a couple things that you all have said in public consistently. One is that the first order of business is to be excellent at what you do, to be good at your craft. So I always tell my students that's first order of business. But all of you also talked about the power of mentors. How do you identify people that you want to mentor? Let me start with Debo and come back to Ted on that.
So picking up on Damaris's point, my fundamental contention is that great lawyers are not born, they're made. There is nobody who's born a great lawyer. Yeah, Thurgood was not born a great lawyer. Charles Hamilton was not born a great lawyer. Justice Sotomayor was not born a great lawyer. Great lawyers are made through experience, through hard work, studying the craft, through making mistakes, through taking some lumps and getting back up and learning from them, and from connecting to people who are willing to invest in you and take you under their wing, essentially, and help guide you in whatever environment you're in. So for me, I want to connect it to this school in the first instance, because I studied a number of courses here on race and the law with the late, great A. Leon Higginbotham, who was a terrific mentor. He was many things, but he was also a terrific mentor. He had been the chief judge of the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, and after he stepped down from the court, he was affiliated with the Paul Weiss firm and taught here and at the Kennedy School. So in some ways it connects all of us, and probably at Harvard Law School as well. And A. Leon took a real interest in young lawyers and lawyers that wanted to go off into the world and be involved in the fight for justice. And so frankly, my firm I picked in large part because A. Leon was there. And I wanted to get close to A. Leon because he was somebody who had manifested an interest in guiding young lawyers and investing his time in that way. And so in some ways, the path that I have taken from here to where I sit right now was based on that bet that I played or made, that A. Leon was going to take an interest in me. My first voting case is as a summer associate with A. Leon at Paul Weiss, and then I kept doing that. in large part because of opportunities that came to me from working with Elian and others that were in his sphere of influence and had a similar input. And so once Ted Wells came to Paul Weiss, I knew it was okay for me to go because there was somebody in charge. I was going to handle things. And so I went to LDF to go litigate voting cases. But that's a line from being a student with aspirations but not knowing how to do it, to taking a step out there and following somebody who nurtured not just me, but scores of lawyers. He was as proud of his former clerks as he was of any opinion that he drafted or any achievement or plaque on his wall. He would speak about his mentees often, and he really felt that that was his contribution. And so the contribution I try to make is to give back in some small way to lawyers that are looking for guidance in their careers. And Vincent Sutherland will tell you, I walked into the building on the phone with a new associate at the firm who had their first call for guidance. And so we were talking something through.
Let me add a level of difficulty, Teddy, before you answer, and that is, not only are you all trying to develop young lawyers, but you're trying to take care of your own business as well. So how do you balance that in making those decisions?
You work a lot. I mean, you don't, look, straight up. I mean, you do, if you were going to have a view of yourself as a person of consequence, then you were going to have to be a player in multiple arenas. So if you were going to have a day job in a law firm, you were going to work hard in that firm, and you have to be excellent, because that's what we're selling. We're selling judgment, excellence by the hour. That's how we're able to charge what we charge. People have problems, and what you were saying, I'm the best person to deal with your problem, and I'm going to deal with your problem, but you're going to pay me a lot of money to deal with it. And if you're not good, people are not going to pay you what you want to charge. So you got to deal with your work life. Then if you're concerned about being a person who impacts your community, you're going to have to do work in your community. When I first started out, I tried to be the hardest working associate in my firm, but I tell people all the time, don't bleed just your law firm. Okay? I joined the Black Bar Association. That kind of became my base because it put me in contact with other young black lawyers who in law school had been involved in BALSA or in college had been involved in the BSU. And I think our second year in practice, we ran a young black woman for Congress. We had no idea how to run a congressional campaign, but this young black woman said, I want to run. We said, we're down. Hey, we learned how to raise money. We learned how to get her registered, and she lost. But out of that, we developed, a group that later on, we eventually ran a guy, of African-American guy, and he won and stayed there for 20-some years. But out of that political campaign, not only did we learn how to run the campaign, but we started to develop a network that we would be tapped into, many of us, for the next 30 years, 40 years. Because we started young and we didn't get separated from our peer group and let the law firm create this wall that separated us from our community. I started doing volunteer work for LDF, NAACP. Okay, early on in my career, as much work as I had in that law firm, I did not let the law firm define my life. Okay, and what you do in those early years is critical. And in terms of mentors, look, when I started in '76, you could count the number of black partners nationally on one hand. So most of us, we were the sole black person, not associate or partner. We're just the only black lawyer in the firm. There was no partner, there were no other associates. It was like usually one person. And so our mentors, we needed mentors, but our mentors were white. Okay, and I had multiple mentors. I mean, I had a guy who was a partner, great trial lawyer who mentored me, but I had several senior associates who are mentors, because you need mentors who can give you different types of mentorship. Because when I was doing that first brief, I couldn't go to my mentor, the partner, and ask him to look at my brief before I turned it in, because the doggone brief was for him. Okay? Okay, so I wanted to make sure my brief was good, so I had to have that mid-level or senior associate who, before I turned it in, I could say, look at this, did I get it right? And the associates will have time to look at your brief. The senior partner, he may have the greatest heart in the world, but he's not going to sit down, just like I'll be candid with you. I'd say I got some of my associates in here, don't ask me to come in here and look at your brief, at 67 years old, because I'm not, you better bring it correct, by the time I get it. But you got different people who, you're going to need different types of mentors. And you're going to need community mentors, okay? People are going to guide you through what role you can play in the community. I tell every Black, Latino lawyer I meet, if you want to participate in your communities, because you have been lucky enough to get a law degree, you will be welcomed with open arms, because every Latino, African-American politician in this city, in this state, needs lawyers. They all have legal issues. They don't have the money to go to a firm. And in terms of complying with campaign finance laws, you will be welcome. You want to play? All you have to do is raise your hand. Now, the problem is you raise your hand, you commit, so many people will be grabbing you, you have to take a step back. But, if you want to be a player in your community, every, charter schools, they all need lawyers to help them. You can get on boards. I mean, the way I learned what a board was about was getting on boards in these community organizations. And then I learned how to run a meeting, how to be a board member, what it was about. But I did it. I didn't wait till I was 40. I didn't wait till I was 50. I was out there in my 20s. And all of those relationships, again, that you develop as a young person, they start to bear fruit years later, because some of the people who are also joiners, participants, they become the leaders. And then you become part of the leadership circle, but you grow up together.
So Damaris and
Tony, can I
go
come
ahead.
back on this for a second? Because I think Lisa and Ted have both made a point about the inside-outside game, which is an important theme of success in legal careers. It's been important, I think, to all of us, but I think I dare say it's going to be more important for the young lawyers in this room, because the law is changing and economies are changing so quickly that you're probably likely to have even more legal jobs than we've had in our lives. And what you're trying to do is build a set of skills, a reputation, and a network that is going to sustain you and help you pivot through these different experiences. There's an inherent tension in what we're talking about, because Damaris came in on the first point, which is, doesn't matter how many people you know if you're not bringing the brief correct to Ted, or your loan documents are a mess, right? It's not gonna solve it for you, right? You have to come correct. You have to be prepared with the technical lawyering skills, and that takes upfront investment. It takes investment throughout, but it takes more investment up front, so there's no way around that. But as you go through your career, you have to be thinking about, what are the things that matter to me, and how do I carve out that time to be connected to them? And Ted mentioned many different ones: politics, not-for-profits, other organizations. Maybe it's your religious affiliation in your church or synagogue, whatever it is, thinking about those different connections, because the law, more than almost any other profession, is about the network and who you're connected to, right? Whether you're going for a government job and the FBI is going to your elementary school to check in on you, which happens, I'm here to tell you, or you're somebody like myself who had been in big law, in a not-for-profit for a long time, in government, and then through some unexpected circumstances back in big law sooner than I had expected to be, right? And having people that will vouch for you, that know you, with whom you've made a contribution in different contexts, that is what enables each of those situations, and the value assigned to that type of network while you're carrying your toolbox with you is really something of tremendous importance for all lawyers, but I think it's of special importance for lawyers of color.
Well, I'm actually going to pick up on that point because it's exactly what I wanted to ask. I think some of the stuff that you're talking about is about lawyering and being competent and being good. But the question I have is, and I'd like all of you, at least I'll start with you, but all of you take a pass at this. Is there a unique role for partners of color, both internally for the firm and externally in the country, that separates you in the setting? And if so, and I know, Lisa, you started this fantastic new blog and you're talking about political stuff, if there is a unique role, how do you manage that?
Well, I think, and it's not unique, I think, to partners of color. You know, academics of color talk about the double burden that they have to bear, which is, you know, we are ambassadors. We get, you know, trotted out in certain circumstances. We are default the mentors for all of the associates of color. So those things happen. And so you're both an ambassador, so that's the outside, you know, and then internally, I mean, I'm like the permanent tenured co-chair of the diversity committee. I will never not be, because there are only 2 partners of color, and me and one other partner of color, and also an NYU alum, and she just made partner a year and a half ago. So I'm kind of the and I think a lot of us end up being the conscience of the law firm. You know, you have a lot of, at least in New York, you have a lot of well-meaning liberal folks. You know, I teased my partners and I said, you're a bunch of New Yorker reading, Starbucks drinking, smug, self-satisfied, Obama voting white folks. I didn't call them white folks, but I just said, you know, folks. You know, to their credit, they said, you know, and I included myself, I said, we are, so that, you know, I didn't make a separation. But I do think that part of what you have to do, you have to sort of be comfortable enough in your own skin and know, you know, what microaggression you're going to ignore, or several microaggressions you're going to ignore. And, you know, that's why that network outside of the office is important, because you go home and say to your significant other or your buddies, you know what so-and-so said to me today, because you're not going to go off in the office. You're just not.
You could do it if you close your door. I'm just saying. You know, you spend a lot of hours in that place.
I'm in a small law firm with, you know, thin walls. So in any case, I think that's, you know, that's part of what you have to do.
So I agree, and I actually want to pivot on something you just said. She said you have to feel comfortable in your skin. That is, we've been talking about doing very good work, about building relationships. The third thing you need to focus on is being true to yourself, okay? You're going to get a memo, and I don't mean a literal memo, but you'll get a memo that, or you'll get a feeling that you need to check your identity at the door when you get to big law. And that is not true. And if you do that, you're just going to burn out, because you have to be comfortable in your skin, because if you work 24/7, and if you have to fake the funk while you're working 24/7, you're not going to be good at anything you do. Okay? And you need to embrace the fact that your experiences, your background is an advantage, and you need to use that perspective to benefit yourself and make the firm believe it's a benefit for them, because it is, right? And so the first thing I tell people is you need to be comfortable in your skin. I made partner, and the whole time I was unapologetically Latina, okay? And I was open about my experiences growing up, and because that's what made me who I was, the values that they appreciate. The hard work was because my mama told me, you gotta work twice as hard to get half as much. And so that's why that ethic that they embraced and they loved and that got me promoted, it was just because of who I was, and I just needed to be comfortable in that skin. Now I'll go back to your question, sorry.
I think that most of us do have special roles to play in our firms. It's hard to avoid. In fact, you would have to affirmatively reject the role, right? You'd have to make an affirmative statement, maybe not out loud, but you know, if you're not engaged in this work and recognizing that There are not as many folks that look like you, perhaps not as many that have come through your experiences, depending on what our experiences have been. If you're not recognizing that, then some people make that choice and put their head down, and there are people that close the door to their office and just kill it and bill time. But part of it is defining, being comfortable in your skin, and also what is the commitment that you've made to be a professional? What does it mean to occupy space as a rare lawyer of color in a profession where there aren't enough? And does the name on the door affect what your self-definition is of what it means? And sometimes there are trade-offs in big firms, because there are hours targets, you have to bring in new business if you're a partner. There are many things that are going to be pulling on you. And so one could decide, I don't have time for this committee. I don't have time to sit down with this person because it's coming out of my time at the end of the day. But when you have come through this process, when people have made time for you, when you understand the history that's brought you to have the opportunity, to me, it's kind of easy to make that time. The other pressure is on your family, because some of that time and your generosity of spirit or commitment to mentor others, there are only so many hours in the day. And so every board you're on, every call you take, every piece of advice you give, every diversity committee meeting, every follow-up call to a recruit, it's coming out of somebody's time, right? And so balancing these competing interests is a challenge that is the double, triple, quadruple, however many burdens you want to talk about. But I think a lot of it is deciding, how do you want to walk through the world? And at the end of the day, how are you going to measure success? And for me, I measure success about trying to kill it for my clients, but trying to make a way for others. Because without people being willing to do that for me, there is no possibility that I would have had the opportunities that I've had.
We're in an ecosystem. I don't see enough students of color. I don't see enough faculty of color. And we have different things we try to do. Ted, what are the types of things that firms can do to increase diversity? How do we think about that? I think about it when I think about faculty as going back to law students, kind of thinking about affecting their experience. What are the types of things that firms can do?
Well, look, the biggest thing you can do is offer people jobs and try to hope that as many of them as you've given offers to accept. So you try to, it's no different than when a college is accepting X number of students, and you try to make sure you get the best yield you can. Now that's looking at it from a very narrow perspective of a particular firm. Now the reality is Paul Weiss is competing for the same small group of minority students as Cravath and as Wilmer Cutler. No, but you know, and I want you to love me because I'm at the point, and I have been for years, that I try to look at it holistically instead of looking at it from the perspective of Paul Weiss as opposed to New York City. And you know, I've had situations with your firm and others where if I thought a student was, because every firm's got a personality, okay? And if I thought a particular student, black student or a Latino student or Asian student was better fitted for X firm than my firm, you know, I'd kind of step away or even direct them to that place. And I don't get, you know, look, what I tell the students that I want them to go, if they want to be in a big firm, I just want to make sure they're going to a big firm that is about excellence, but also has an environment where I think they are going to get mentored and they're going to be given a chance. I mean, look, my biggest recruiting pitch to any minority student, and I can say it with great sincerity, is if you got a problem, you can come to my office, and if your problem is real, I can deal with it. Okay, I can be the enforcer if I think something is not going down, correctly. And I say you should ask. If you go to X firm and you have not seen any minority partners there, or there's only been one, that should, you know, in the year 2017, that should tell you something. Now maybe you can say, well, you know what, I'm gonna be the pioneer and I'm gonna break through it, but very often there's a reason there's only been one or none, okay? So, you know, you have to think that through, and I will tell people where I think what firms have a better sensitivity to these issues than others. And when you're interviewing, that's what you have to look at that firm's history and ask, how many black partners are there? Do the black partners at that firm, are they in a position of influence where they're going to be listened to, where they can be the conscience of the firm? So you can't be the conscience if people don't want to listen to you. Okay?
You gotta speak loudly.
No. Hey, I will tell you, they will put earplugs in their ears, or they will listen to you, and then you walk out, and it's like you weren't there. So, you know, speaking loudly can help, but you need to make sure that at some point you are being heard, and I believe you are heard because they have a respect for you. But just because your firm has respect for you, all firms don't have the same level of respect or sensitivity, and you've got to do your research.
Lisa, what do you think? What more can firms do?
I think there's some concrete things. I mean, people probably know about the study that Erin Reeves did. If people don't know, Erin Reeves is a diversity consultant, and she did a study with law firm partners. She created an identical memo, and they put mistakes in the legal memo, and on one copy they said it was, you know, Bill Merriweather III, NYU law graduate, white. And on the other, it was like Marcus Johnson, NYU law graduate. So in other words, everything was the same except the ethnicity. And with the memo from the white student, people overlooked some of the mistakes. They said, oh, he just needs a little, you know, coaching. He seems like he has promise. With the black memo, they said, they caught every mistake, and they said, I don't understand how he even got to NYU, how he got through. So that's concrete evidence of real implicit racism. I'm not gonna call it bias, that's racism. And so one thing that you could do is you could take, just in terms of pipeline, resumes and blank out anything that identifies the race of the applicant, and then see what kind of yield you get. Another thing you can do is, you know, my firm, we hire laterals. We really don't hire people out of school, but you can devise, firms can devise, I hate to say tests because people come out of law school and they don't want to take any more tests, but, you know, if you're hiring a lateral and it's a corporate person, you could say, all right, you know, draft this agreement, you know, for me and give it to me. Or, you know, I don't know if you want to give somebody a research assignment, but they're like on the transactional side of what I do. If you're hiring somebody that has some experience, you say, well, mark this up and let's see what the comments look like. And again, do it blind. So those are some things, you know, if you really want to get nitty gritty, let's be real. So those are some ideas.
I actually think firms need to do it, they need to attack this on 3 fronts, right? It's recruitment, retention, and promotion. Recruitment, you need to expand the criteria that we use to actually get people in the door, right? We focus on school tiers, school grades, and law review. And those should not be what we're looking at, right? When I'm interviewing people, I look to see whether they have the grit and determination to be successful. I look at their what their personal background is. Someone who had to care for their sick mother or work, you know, 20 hours to support their family while they were in law school, and their grades aren't stellar because of that, or they decided to go to a lower tier school because they were getting a full ride there as opposed to Harvard. That's the type of like actual analysis we need to be doing at the recruitment level, right? We need to be going past grades, going past schools, and, you know, law review. Then once you actually get the people in the building, you need to make sure that they're getting meaningful work. You need to make sure that they're getting support, mentorship, sponsorship, and like professional development. You need to be creating safe spaces so that they feel like they can be heard. And then we need to promote people, right? If you can't see it, you can't achieve it. If you don't see people like you on that letterhead, you either think you don't belong there or they don't want you there, which might not be true. And then this goes back to the question you asked earlier about what is our unique role as a partner of color. We not only need to be role models, and we need to use our platform to get together with like-minded people like us and, you know, leverage our collective strength. I think we actually need to speak to our non-brown counterparts and explain to them what it means, like why we can't have this notion of color blindness, right? That we, as most big law firms try to tout, right? That, you know, we're colorblind. We do not, we don't take into account, and we don't treat different based on color. And that's a nice thing to say, but it's not true. And so we need to like make it, like, you know, Lisa said, people mean well, and a lot of the times they don't want to have the dialogue because they don't want to be misunderstood and mislabeled. I'm like, have the dialogue with me, because I have thick skin and I can set you straight, right? So that's one of the roles and one of the things that needs to get, yeah, okay.
So I want to push back a little bit on what you said, not because I disagree, but because I think just from a real politics standpoint, I don't know how realistic it is. So, you know, I feel that Black, Latino lawyers, we suffer from what I call the affirmative action discount, meaning that whatever school we go to, they assume, you know, in their view, we got in through quote-unquote affirmative action, which in their view means lower standards. And we confront that implicit bias. If you say, well, for students of color, let's go to a different tier school and not pay attention to grades, aren't you potentially compounding what they're going to confront? How do you, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, and I was getting this pushback from one of my white colleagues saying we have to do this, we're not going to get more people of color, and I think you're right, but how do you deal with the bias they're going to confront?
So I actually don't only do it for people of color. When I'm looking at resumes, I actually do it colorblind, even though I just, you know, said we shouldn't do that. And what I'm saying is I actually look for people who have grit, hunger, ownership, right? Those are the people who are successful in law, right? And so, and then I actually believe that most first generation and most people of color have that innately, right? Even to get to the place where they are either applying to law school or even to the firms, right? And so I think, you know, as being, now that I'm on this side, I actually have a say in recruiting. I actually have a say. So when I see a resume that's borderline, I'm like, it ain't gonna cost us anything to invite somebody into the office and interview them. Ultimately, it might be a no, but right, you might be surprised when they sit in front of you and they can occupy that professional space despite what their resume says or despite what, you know, they can handle their own. I can talk personally about my experience. I was not top of my class at NYU, but I am a hell of an interviewer. And I worked my ass off to get here. And I made sure that whoever was on that other side of my interview understood that. Look, part of it is, I feel like, yes, it's gonna be a challenge to convince, you know, the organization, but the only way that we're actually gonna make any change is if we actually push back on that. The same way you just pushed back on me, I think it's you know, I'll win some of these, I'll lose some, maybe most of them, but at some point, like there'll be somewhere that gives. And I think the other way to do it is, me and you were talking about this earlier, where, you know, pounding on the table for another person of color looks like, oh, you're just pounding on that person because you're trying to raise your numbers, right? Like, and I think one of the ways to actually deal with that is the same way you ask, you know, the students to make sure you build relationships, make sure you build networks so that you have people who are, I do the same thing. I may not pound for somebody on the table, but I'll make sure people who are heard on the background, I'm like, that person is stellar. So I make sure that the people who are heard at that table are aware of the people coming up who are valuable, who are an asset, who need to be at our firm, and who might not be known by everybody, right? And so I make sure that I advocate for them, even if I'm not the one pounding.
I will tell you, I say to my recruitment committee all the time, if you want to increase the number of minority associates, we are going to have to take chances. Because in the large firms, what they want to do is start off by saying, we only want to hire people on law review. That's their litmus test. Now, I tell them all the time, I wasn't on law review, and I point out, I say, so-and-so was magna cum laude. We keep him in the office and don't bring him out except to do a damn brief. Okay, so, so first, I want to say I reject that narrow focus on law review. And I reject the narrow focus on, well, we want to only have A's and B pluses. If you have a B, oh God, they had a B or C. You know, I think that's all BS. I don't think there's a correlation between being a great lawyer and being able to take a 2-hour test at a law school. But what happens is no different than the 40-yard dash in the NFL. They say they measure by that. It doesn't mean you're a good football player. It just means they have to have some metrics. So law firms are paying $150,000, $180,000 a year. They don't know what, you know, they walk in a room, they interview for 20 minutes, and they got to make a decision. Am I going to pay this kid almost $200,000? All they can do is look at his transcript. So that's what they do. Now, the problem is, if you let big law firms stick to that criteria of only law review, then nobody's going to have that many black students because we don't have enough black, Latino students that meet that criteria. Now, so I say straight up, the criteria I think is wrong, but even if you want to adhere to it, we're going to take some chances because I don't think it correlates in terms of who is going to be an excellent lawyer. And I take some chances, and I'm going to tell you, the price of it is sometimes we hit great winners, sometimes we hit losers, but I'm going to tell you, the same thing happens with the law review people. Some are great, and some are not so great, okay? And, you know, to the extent, what Lisa said, does that increase the possibility of people having affirmative action bias? Well, that's the argument that, you know, the people say, well, why we shouldn't have affirmative action because they might create bias. I don't care if it creates bias. The bias is going to be there anyway. Let me tell you that. Okay, if it wasn't affirmative action bias, there's going to be some other bias. At the end of the day, it's skin color bias. Okay, that's what's going to happen. So, you know, my view is let's get as many people that are qualified, because all these people are qualified. Okay, we're trying to figure out where we're going to make a cut. And I say get as many people in the door, give them fair opportunity to succeed, and some percentage will and some percentage won't. But I will tell you, over the years, the people I take risks on, their success or failure rate are no different than those law review people. Okay, because if anybody tells you everybody they hire who's on the law review is going to become a partner or some great lawyer, that's just BS. That's false. So, but you have to advocate to get away from these barriers that some recruiting committees use not to add minority lawyers to the firm. You got to be in the race. You got to be in it to win it, as I say. So my job is I'm going to get as many people in the door, and then I believe if I have enough people in the door, I'm going to find some, you know, top tier people. And even those who are not, I'm going to give them a shot, have it on their resume, get exposure, learn, and most of them will go on to have great careers. Great careers. Because the main thing is, can you get out of law school? Can you pass the bar? If you can do all that, you're going to do fine. If you have the grit, determination, gumption. Now, you won't go home and look at soap operas, I'm not. I'm speaking to the choir here. The people looking at the TV shows are home looking at the TV shows.
Debo, let me spin the lens for a minute. Are there things that law schools can be doing that will help students succeed in firms?
I think that's an interesting question, and I know there are conversations going on throughout the legal academy about how you train lawyers. And one of the things that I guess we've touched upon in different ways is that there are different skills that you need to succeed in a law firm. And law firms need people with different skills too. So that's not to say that you can't, that you can get through a law firm and not have some level of core technical skills within your discipline. But I take Ted's point that we have some folks that may be great at writing the brief or great at marking up the transactional documents, but Lord, would you ever put them with a client, right? Like it just wouldn't happen, and they're not likely to bring in the business, right? Which is the lifeblood of the firms that are prepared to pay for Ted and Lisa's talents. Damaris and I come at a discount, so if there are those of you out there that have legal matters, we're prepared to speak to you. But I think that law schools have to be in the conversation. You have to be thinking about what does the profession require in the future, and I think some of the other skills, some of the things that Damaris was talking about are coming to be understood by people that are studying the science about what are the skills that are the indicia of success. There's some studies that are being done in that regard, and some of the leadership things, Tony, that we've talked about, and other things. And that's something that law schools need to look at on the way in the door, because law schools have their own version of the law review that they apply on the threshold level. And if everybody just keeps chasing the same narrow group of folks, then you don't expand the pool. To be sure, we need to do pipeline stuff that expands the pool and has more people that perhaps can hit the markers, those traditional markers. But it's really silly if you're not looking for the folks that have the talent and the capability. And I think law schools can think about their curriculum, their criteria. They can lead, in a sense, by showing success, different quantums of success that firms can be open to. I want to add one point to the previous conversation, because it was implicit but not explicit. Leadership matters a lot in diversity. If you have firm leaders that are holding their firms to account for improving things, I was here, and there was a city bar initiative to make diversity better, and I was here. I know I look like I'm 15, but I'm 50. So I was here a long time ago, and the conversation is much the same today. I mean, to be sure, we've made some progress, but you can just pull up the articles. You just go back and you look at the American Lawyer, you pull up the articles, and they're the same articles about the same difficulties. And so if you don't have some firms and some firm leaders that are making an affirmative commitment to move the dial, to change things, and to go boldly in that direction, perhaps to show what it looks like to lead, and then folks will follow. It happens with salaries, it's going to happen with diversity, and there's an additional point, which is the ABA has a resolution out now, and clients are very focused now on diversity and are beginning to measure firms in part, including with some incentives in some cases, about what they're doing in terms of diversity. And so there are a set of dynamics in the world right now that create possibilities so that the articles in 15 or 20 more years are not the same as they have been for the last 20 years.
Let me stay on that point for a minute. So obviously making the business case is always a great place to start. How else do we convert firm leadership to take this on as a leadership issue within the firm, to say diversity means something to us? Obviously, the finance will drive a lot of that conversation. What are the other things that drive that conversation?
Well, I think part of it has to do with the leaders, the people that you choose to lead, right? And that's gender, it's race, it's experience. There are a whole range of different things. I think today there was an article that a firm picked an African-American leader as the managing partner. Somebody flipped it to me inside the firm while I was in a meeting today. It has to do in part with who you're vesting with the responsibility to lead you, because there are folks that will keep doing things in the way that they've done things and will try and recreate. I mean, that's the difficulty. I was on the recruiting committee at Paul Weiss. I'm on the recruiting committee at WilmerHale. There will always be a certain number of folks that are looking to recreate the world in their image, right? It's the same problem with federal clerkships. It's a problem across our profession. But then there are going to be those who are pushing the envelope in the ways that Damaris and Ted and Lisa at her own firm are, who are thinking about, well, what are the indicia of success? And let me tell you about what my experiences have been with some associates that fit both profiles, both the ones that fit your perfect measure and came in and wouldn't get it done and were out in a year, and folks that perhaps was a little engine that could and are killing it. And I have gone to bat for associates that may not have been bright and shiny when they came in, but these are people that leading practice leaders go to all the time. I'm now worried I brought these people to the firm. They have so much work, right? But that's the type of thing you have to do. You have to go to bat. You have to say, don't make this mistake. This person has a demonstrated track record of success. We don't need everybody to have the same charisma. Sometimes it matters that you can do the work and do it well.
Damaris, I want to come to you because you're probably the closest to the end of the pipeline on this panel. But what have you seen that's worked in terms of pipeline issues? What are the things that we need to replicate?
So I actually think it's making us visible. That's the first thing, right? Because
Trying to do that tonight.
and part of the pipeline, a lot of the stuff that I do, once I became partner, I got a lot of notes in the mail from students who were in law school, students who were pre-law, people who were in high school, and they had seen the New York Times article, and they were like, holy crap, I was from Brooklyn, or holy crap, I'm Latina, and they were like, wow, you're an example, right? So like part of that is just, again, letting people see that they can achieve it, right? If they see someone like them from their background, so I think that's part of it, right? And then again, it goes back to making sure that we're looking for things past just those numbers. And, you know, that thing about leadership, that's for real, right? Unfortunately, we can't just wait for people to die. So we need to, so I think, it's true. So I think what we need to do is basically use ourselves as examples. And I look, I push back a lot because I recruit really heavy. I was the first, I don't plan to be the last, and I don't have patience. So I can't sit there by myself for too long, I get lonely. So I actually make sure that I go back and I say, look, I sold this place to like the 10 people who are coming this year, and you ain't gonna make me look bad, because my word is my word, right? You can't mess up my street cred. So you need to make sure that I can deliver on what I said this place is willing to do in terms of its diversity and inclusion efforts, right? And if that means I have to do it by myself, but look, I'm not, right? So some of y'all have to come along with me. And I think once you get in the ear of some, at some point, those some are gonna grow. And some other people are gonna fall off, and you can get the change. It'll take a while. I can't guarantee it's gonna happen. I hope it happens in my lifetime. You scared me when you opened this talk. But, and I have a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I was hoping it happened in their lifetime, but it's about, you know, it is, you know, people call it a burden. I see it as a privilege, right? Sitting in Brooklyn in my steps, I never thought I'd be sitting up here with Ted Wells. Actually, I didn't know who you were, but, but now I know. I respect it, Maya, and one day I want to be you. Maybe keep my hair, but.
Damn.
Damaris can be like that. Damaris can be like that.
Friends,
Just
Ted,
slap
I
a brother,
promise.
you know.
I promise we're gonna be friends.
Welcome to my world, Ted. Lisa, let me ask you, we've talked about mentorship. I appreciate Debo and Damaris' conversation about kind of leadership at the firm level. Are there strategies you think that we should be talking to students of color about that they should employ to be successful in law firm culture?
Yeah, I think there are some. I mean, one, and this is maybe it's a balance that you have to keep, but you have to stay true to your authentic self, but also, I tell people, find the thing you have in common with the people that you work with. And there's always going to be something. You would be surprised that the people, you know, everybody loves Drake now, so that's corny. I mean, my kids tell me that's corny, you know, but whatever the thing is, I mean, one of my mentors, because I am corny, I like old Broadway show tunes. So this man is old enough to be my father, but if he wants to come into my office and talk about Hoagie Carmichael, I'm like, yeah, Stardust, that's a great song. And it makes him feel like he's only 40 instead of 82. So it's find the thing. It's the Yankees, go Yankees, or whatever the thing is, you know, film, television, This Is Us, whatever the thing is, find that thing. Because, you know, and it's not fair, but, you know, the likelihood is that we have much more experience interacting with white people than they have interacting with us. And so part of the burden is to make them comfortable. And that does not mean not being true to yourself. I will never forget the time Public Enemy first came to my office and Flavor Flav showed up 2 hours late. And the receptionist said, Lisa, there's a Mr. Flav here to see you.
And he doesn't know what time it is.
And I'm like, brother, you're 2 hours late, you wear a clock. How does that happen? But the thing is, so yes, you know, I brought Public Enemy in, but at the same time, I'm going to talk about Hoagie Carmichael or, you know, Man of La Mancha or whatever the thing is. And if you scratch the surface with most people, you will find that thing. You know, I happen to be Catholic, so the Irish Catholic guys, I was like, yeah, when you're Catholic like us, blah, blah, blah. You know, whatever it is, whatever. I'm shameless. If it's legal and it's not pornographic, I will talk about it. So, that's my take.
Look, I think it's good to have a social relationship, but at the end of the day, it's about the work. What I tell young associates, your real client is the senior associate who you are writing the first draft of that brief for. That is your client. Or it's the junior partner who you're doing that work for. I mean, from my perspective, at my level, what I want to know is who is going to give me a piece of work product that I do not have to spend too much time editing. Because if I have to do a rewrite, there's a difference between editing and a rewrite, then I can't see the Yankees. Okay? I can't see the Giants.
And he won't take you either.
Okay? Okay? And you're going to mess my weekend up. So people figure out real quick what people will make their life easier. And I will tell you, though, social is good, work product is better. Okay, and that's why I say, and get that mentor who's that mid-level associate who can look at that draft brief or that research memo before you turn it in to the person who's going to grade it. Because unfortunately, early impressions can be lasting impressions. I used to have a partner who said, man who becomes known as early riser can sleep till noon. Think about it, okay? And if people get the impression, this is the person who turns out first-rate work product, that presumption stays with you. If the impression becomes, this is the person who gives me the research memo that I don't trust, or I have to go back and go to the library myself, okay, pretty soon, they're not going to sit there and nurture you. They're going to find somebody who can do the research memo on the first round right, because people are busy. And really what people are trying to figure out is who is very selfish. Who can make my life easier? Who can make me look good? Because they've given me this great brief, and I give it to the client, and now I'm viewed as the person with the right team and the right talent. But especially in those early years, you know, first impressions can be last impressions. Don't get off on a bad foot. Realize your real client is that mid-level associate who's probably going to be the grader. And before you give that person something, check it out. Go find a friend. Somebody will look at it. And then once you get your sea legs, then you don't have to keep showing the stuff for the rest of your life. But you will learn. And just don't take the chance that, oh, I got it right. Or they'll teach me the next day. Let somebody junior teach you offline before you turn it in.
Okay, Ted made it look like I'm saying that work is not important. that goes with, but I will say one thing as a follow-up to that. You know, the work is important. One thing I will say, and this is critical, particularly for associates of color and women of color in particular, you do not get honest feedback. People are loath to give you feedback. So all of those things that Ted is saying are absolutely true, but the other thing I would say, after every assignment, ask for feedback. Don't wait until the annual review. Say, how could I have done this better? Because that way, if you did stumble and you're not quite sure, it's better, I mean, a partner of mine calls it eating the death cookie. Basically, it's better to get the bad news early because one, they'll see that you want to improve. Two, you will overcome their reticence about, they think that women are going to cry. I don't know if they think brothers are going to punch them. I don't know what the deal is, but the point is, ask for feedback, because that's your opportunity. Another friend of mine said, nobody cares about your career as much as you do. And so the responsibility for your career rests primarily with you. So these places are intimidating. You know, big firms, doesn't matter, big firm or small firm like mine, it's still, these are people, you're working for people that are intimidating, but you have to get over that, because for one thing, you know, successful lawyers have confidence. They project confidence to clients. So, you know, you have to go and ask, and you may hear things you don't like. I mean, one of the things I always say, the gift of my career is the first boss I had was a black woman. There was nowhere to hide. When I screwed something up, I knew I had just screwed it up. It was like I couldn't hide behind racism, sexism, anything, and it was a great lesson. So that's the other piece of advice I would give.
Let me run one last question through all of you. I'm struck, and I'm not as quick as Ted or Debo to tell my age, but I've been here a long time and practiced for a while before that. And I've seen some things, Lisa referenced them a minute ago. So we're hearing some things we haven't heard in a long time coming from the nation's capital and other corners of the country. Reflecting on the 21st century, we have a lot of not only law students, but young lawyers in this room. What advice or message would you want them to hear from you going forward? Debo, let me start with you.
So there's career advice, and there are three things that I think lead to success in the law. For those of you who've heard it before, I apologize in advance. It's the toolbox, which we've all talked about. Developing those skills early, the core lawyering skills in your field, because the toolbox goes with you. It's portable. And so you don't have to be limited by any particular situation. You bring those skills with you. They will open the door to the next opportunity. The next, and we've talked a lot about it, are the relationships. No profession requires them more than ours does, and so focusing on those things. But what does that mean? It means that you're being a good colleague. It means that you're reading somebody else's memo. It means that you're giving a heads up to somebody about a particular partner to work with or not to work with, or how to succeed in working with that partner, how they like it. A partnership is like, it's like a feudal system where each lord likes things in a different way. And so you need to learn these things as you come in, and who's going to tell you? Ted's point. You're not going to go to the partner. There's going to be an associate or a mid-level lawyer who's going to teach you how to navigate in that space. And all of this goes toward your reputation. At the end of the day, what are people going to say about you? What kind of lawyer are you? What kind of person are you? Are you a person of integrity? And those three things, your toolbox, your relationships, and your reputation, if you tend to those three things, you'll have a successful career. But the other thing is, even when you get into a place like one of our firms, there is a narrow pathway to become partner at any firm. And so the reason it's so important to be working on these things is because you don't know what the pathway is going to be for you exactly. Doesn't mean you don't come to a place and try to become Ted Wells. You should. But even Ted Wells became partner at Paul Weiss by becoming Ted Wells someplace else first. I'm at WilmerHale, and I did other things first. Damaris is a different situation. We all want to be like her, where you just get in there and kill it. Lisa had different experiences. And so the point here is, really think about those things, because they will carry with you throughout your career in a range of contexts, and you should be open to the things that you want to do now, but also the things you can't yet see. And if you tend these three things, you'll be well on your way.
Damaris?
So I echo that. I go back to be true to you, okay? You need to be...
It's mine.
Take it? Oh, sorry. Be true to you. No. The only way to keep sane is that. Remember what your core values are. Remember what you want. You're going to kill it at work. You're going to be successful. But also, remember what your priorities were. If you care about family, if you care about community, if you care about church, don't forget, if you have hobbies, if you go to the gym, I should start doing that. Like, you do those things, right? But what I would say to you sitting here today is, like, we need you. And we need you in big law. And I know that's going to, I was having this conversation with Tony right before the panel. We need you, and you can do good and still make a lot of money and give back, right? I was asked recently during my the recruiting season by an applicant, do you feel like a sellout? And I literally gave her a call back just because she had the balls to ask me that, right? I was like, you had 20 minutes with me and you felt you could ask me that? Girl, I got you. Right? And I said to her, I do, right? I do. Because when I interviewed at Cravath 10 years ago, I had the chairman of the firm look at my resume and said, it looks like you want to do pro bono. Why are you here? And I said, because I need to feed my family, because you boast that you're the best at training, and that someday I might not be here, but I want to know what I'm up against, right? Those were not the right answers, and he must have been tired or something and still let me in. But still, right? And I have stayed there for my 10 years, and I give back. I do pro bono. I'm on the pro bono committee. I have a Title VII case. I go to Alabama once a month, and we're suing the county of Alabama, the sheriffs, the police for racism and sex discrimination in hiring. I oversee the associates who are doing DACA applications, asylum application, travel ban work. We just wrote an amicus for the transgender issues up before the Supreme Court. So we do good work. And I sit on boards, we donate money, stuff that I couldn't have done had I not been at Cravath. So I just use the resources of the firm and my own individual resources, that toolbox, and I give back. Right, so when you're considering whether to go to big law or, given the recent events in America, I should actually go somewhere and use my skills to fight back, you can, right? You can, and you can do it through big law. So follow Debo's advice so you can actually be great, and then follow my advice so that we can actually address your first question, which was, can law actually change? Yes, right? A lot of the stuff that, I'm gonna get in trouble for this, our president is doing, right, is through the vehicle of laws and constitutions. And we have a special skill set, right, to be able to counteract that. And as people of color, we have a different perspective and a different understanding, and it impacts us so directly that we have to be the ones that are taking the forefront. Well, and I know, you're true, it's true. We should not be banking on big firm to do it, but we can try to push them.
Lisa?
So I'm not at big law, I'm at little law because we have 80 lawyers. And, for me, I think, I work in culture and the arts, and I think there are lots of places where we can be as lawyers, whether it's big law and using those resources, or in our situation, we also did an amicus brief on the travel ban case for the ADL, even though we're not that big. We did that. I have partners that are out at protests constantly. I have a partner who started a group, Torah Trumps Hate, and they were at the March for Racial Justice. She was leading a group of Orthodox Jewish people marching for racial justice. So you don't know how you can make a difference. You don't have to necessarily be in the public sector to make a difference. The point is, as I said earlier, and I do take it seriously, we took an oath to uphold the Constitution, and I won't get in trouble in my firm for saying this. We have people in Washington who are trashing the Constitution on the daily. And one of the things, and this is to me, all lawyers right now, I don't care what color we are, we have to stand up for the rule of law and we have to stand up for the Constitution. And that's a duty that every one of us that graduated from a law school has right now. If we're going to have what did Ben Franklin say? A republic if you can keep it, and we're only going to keep it if those of us in the profession work to let people know. People don't even know what's in the Constitution. So again, that's what we can do no matter where we are practicing.
You get the last word, Ted.
I'll end where I began. Know your history. Have an appreciation about the role of race in the United States, about the role that the legal system has played, about the role that lawyers in the system can play. For those of you, I assume most of you are here at NYU, look, you are at one of the greatest law schools in the country. What I would say is, don't be afraid to take chances. For those of you who want to go into big law, do it. But for most of you in here, and I know how it was for me, I mean, my mother worked in a post office, so I knew once I got out of law school, whatever job I did, I was like so far ahead of where my mother had been. And I was willing to take chances. And you can either let going to an elite law school paralyze you and say, oh, well, I've got to do this and I got to keep my mouth shut. Or you can say, well, I want to go to Cravath, or I want to go be a public interest lawyer. But, you know, come back to being true to yourself. I mean, don't be afraid to take chances. But the one thing I will say to all of you, do the best that you can. I tell students all the time, if you waste this opportunity and then you go to your first job, I don't care whether it's a public interest firm or a big firm, and you barely got the doggone job because you screwed up here and didn't do the best you could, and you're just so happy that you have the job, I will tell you, you are not going to be able to speak to problems in that workplace because you're going to be so afraid that you're holding on to the job by your fingernails that you're going to be frozen and not heard or respected or willing to speak up. So, you know, it's what she said earlier that her mother used to say, we have to be twice as good to go half as far. I was raised on that principle. It may sound fundamentally unfair. Why should I, because I'm a person of color, have to be twice as good to go half as far? I accept that it's unfair, but that's still the reality that we are living in America. But it's a continuing struggle. And as long as you understand that and don't get, you know, caught up that this is some abstract meritocracy, I think you're going to be okay. Learn your history, though. Learn your history.
So the people on this stage are the gold standard in our business. Join me in thanking them for coming out tonight.